My name is Andrea Klim, and you are watching Turn to the Stars. And today is April 25th, 2018, and I'm going to give you a little overview of today's highlights of the show. And first, I'm going to be talking about Scorpio's full moon, which is this Sunday, April 29th, 2018, at 7:07 p.m. Eastern Daytime, and that's at 9 degrees and 34 minutes in the constellation of Scorpio. And then I'm going to be doing a short forecast of the effects and who's affected by this full moon in Scorpio. And then I'm going to also talk about Chiron and its move into the constellation of Aries. And what does that mean to you? I'm going to be talking about the Mars conjunct Pluto now and in Saturn conjunct Pluto in 2020. And I'm going to be covering Uranus's move into Taurus and history, what to expect. So basically, in starting out the show, I really do want to cover that full moon in Scorpio. And because it is, the sign Scorpio is one of the most intense signs of the zodiac because it's fixed. It's the most intense water sign because it's fixed, it's latent because of the planets that rule it, which are Mars. And when Mars energy is present, so Mars and Pluto both rule Scorpio. And kind of break it down, when Mars energy is present, some of the ways that we can experience the effects are, there's a lot of activity. In a most basic sense, there's strong desire. Desire can be shown very much out in the front. Energy is strong. There's a forcefulness that can be present depending on the angles that are going to the planet. There can be a forcefulness, an impulsiveness. You can see leadership qualities, courage. The animal within is shown through the energy that's present when Mars is pronounced in a chart. Sexuality is something that is shown or displayed in some way. In the most positive sense, enthusiasm, fearlessness, constructive heroicness, assertiveness, bravery. Mars can mean war. In a negative sense, it can mean cruelty, destructiveness, combativeness, violence, defiance, aggressiveness, fighting. And then, so now I want to talk about Pluto because we're talking about the full moon in Scorpio. In Scorpio, the sign, the zodiac sign, is ruled by Mars and Pluto. And so Pluto, whenever Pluto's energy is present, here's some of the things we might experience. And some of the basic things are transformation, consecration, rebirth, change. Powerful forces are present. Power, trapped energy, transmutation. Some of the positive things are discovery of buried treasure, resurrection, detoxification. There's this incredible inner strength, letting go of control. Positive forces. Some of the negative of Pluto is annihilation, feeling like you're in hell, disintegration, dark forces, destruction, misery, darkness. There's this strong controlling sense. There's, you can also have, when Pluto is present, a penetration, meaning a powerful, penetrating direction or powerful wisdom, life-changing information. And on the negative, it can really mean toxic forces, that there's a struggle, that there's a willfulness, that there's a desecration, death, or just a holding on to something, not wanting to let go and let God step in. So, the full moon that's coming up, as we approach that full moon energy, every night the moon gets a little fuller. There are powerful forces at work in this chart as the Scorpio full moon is applying a lot of pressure. So I have a chart which I'm going to show you that really displays the full moon. Here's the full moon. Oh, I'm sorry. This is not the full moon. That's a different chart. This is the full moon in Scorpio. And as you can see, there's this grand fixed cross that goes right to the full moon in Scorpio. And it's over here in what we call the sixth house of health and well-being. So we're going through some type of transformation in the area of work, in areas that affect our health on an emotional level. So it is really not the easiest chart to read because it is packed with, there's a lot of pressure, but there's also some really nice aspects that I'm going to talk about in moving forward. So what this chart shows is there's a lot of pressure, and a lot of pressure is being applied to it by the North Node, which we saw at the top of the chart, and to that full moon, and that North Node is at 10 degrees in the constellation of Leo, and the South Node is in Aquarius at 10 degrees, and so and at the bottom of the chart we have we see the South Node, and the Sun is opposite the Moon, of course. So we have the full moon in Scorpio opposite the Sun in Taurus at 9 degrees, and then we have at the top of the chart we have the North Node in Leo, and at the bottom of the chart we have the South Node in Aquarius, and it's squared off on all the sides. So there's this is what we call a fixed grand cross, and so it is a pressure-packed chart, and there's areas within that this full moon is going to shine on in our lives. And there's areas within each of our souls where secrets and hidden or trapped emotions are apt to be revealed. Scorpio is a fixed sign, and so it has the strength to uncover that which will not let go. And one of the things I think about when I think about the symbol of Scorpio, you see the crab or the scorpion with the stinger tail. And so we can say that this energy can have a sort of a stinger effect because the experience of this energy can hurt. And just like the scorpion, the energy wants to penetrate deeply until it gets to the bottom of things. And during this full moon, you will discover what you want to deeply commit to and what you need to release and let go of. It has the capacity to unveil this information to you regarding experiences you're having in your life. And Scorpio does rule over other people's money and money owed to you. Sexuality, as I said before, life, death, and rebirth. Money can come to you or you give it to others. Finances, money, both yours and others, can come into play during this time, as both Taurus and Scorpio are what we call succedent signs, meaning that they're interested in materials and gathering of materials and things of value. So another way I like to describe Scorpio is that it is the detective, the quietly active component who is known to bring forth revelations and uncovering of the root aspects of emotion. And emotion and feelings are the avenue by which our soul gets to remind us or I should say, our soul reminds us of why we are here. In effect, the Scorpio moon can raise our awareness to hidden aspects of ourselves. And as due to that fixed cross, square to the north and south nodes, this time gives us no choice but to work out the things that surface. And there is an aspect of unconditional love available through the full moon and the trining aspect to Neptune in Pisces. That means that there's this harmony, there's this nice flow of energy, there's a gift here. And that's present in this full moon also. And by this I mean that emotions will be brightly lit for us to acknowledge what we feel as it applies easily by a trining angle to Neptune, as I said before. And Neptune is the great resolver, dissolver, clarifier in this sense, and it aids in bringing us together because one way to describe Neptune's energy when it is well aspected is unconditional love, bliss, unlimited love that is out of this world. Neptune in Pisces in this chart is in what we call the fifth house of the heart. So it really does bring that into focus, our hearts, and lends energy to hear the voice of our heart. And a trip to a nearby body of water, such as a lake, river, or the ocean, will be a most healing experience because this is water. Scorpio is a water sign, and it usually represents the murky, stuck waters that where there's nothing moving. And so I think one of the challenges here is to get things moving, especially with Mars and Pluto beside each other in this chart. I'm going to talk about that as we move forward. And another thing I want to mention is that healing happens when divine love is asked to be present. And it uplifts, it purifies, and then the healing happens, whether it be emotional, physical, spiritual, or in the mind. So there's certain things that are supportive in this chart of healing, and that healing can take place during this full light of transformation with this full moon in Scorpio. And one of the things that just happened was Chiron, the asteroid, moved into Aries, and it's also in this chart in the fifth house, which means that healing of your heart can happen now. And Chiron represents a wound that holds a key to heal, and Aries represents the self. Self-healing can take place now. Also shown in the full moon chart, there's, as I talked about before, there's a conjunction, meaning that Mars is conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, meaning that they're right beside each other in our solar system. And as you heard me mention earlier, these two planets are the rulers of Scorpio, and they give an extra push for success and even obsession with achieving a goal. So the full moon period provides basically an open door for you to succeed in something which is near and very dear to your heart. And the trine from the sun in Taurus and the sextile from the full moon to Saturn, those aspects offer you support that you need to be able to work hard to achieve your goals. So basically what it says, what those aspects indicate, is that wherever you put your energy, it will come back to you. And you know, Saturn is retrograde. I just wrote an article the other day about Saturn being retrograde, and the meaning of that time is that we get to review certain things in our lives, especially karmic things. And we do look at Saturn as being the great teacher, the keeper of time, karma, the Lord of Karma, if you will. And as Saturn is retrograde, which I just said, it's retrograde for all the way till September 6th. So if you're looking at this particular time right now, end of April of 2018, and if you move this chart 2 years forward, you will see that we don't have Mars next to Pluto, but we have Saturn right next to Pluto. And that'll be in 2020. And how this refers back now is that Mars, as I said before, Mars is right beside Pluto right now. And in 2020, Saturn is going to be right next to Pluto. So this is a very important time on this full moon in Scorpio. What this means is this is the birthing of something very important that will come full circle, step by step toward 2020. Miracles can happen and continue along the way. Make sure you take time to move forward confidently with endurance and persistence and concentration. You will feel the passion associated with this full moon. Again, the full moon forms a harmonious angle to Neptune, which opens our heart for healing. So if your birthday is around the end of any month of this year, or around the end of any month, you'll feel the influences of this full moon the most if you know the most. So if you and also if you know the degrees of the planets in your birth chart, look for planets that are between 6 and 12 degrees of any zodiac sign. So planets in these degrees puts a spotlight on you, and you'll notice heightened emotions and feelings during this full moon in Scorpio. So basically, if your birthday is around the end of any month, this full moon is going to highlight something in your life. You will feel the influences by the experiences that are occurring. And I also wanted to talk with you a little bit during today's broadcast about a big shift that's happening. Uranus, the planet, has been over the last 7 years in the constellation of Aries. And it's going to be shifting out of that sign and moving into Taurus on May 15th. And I thought just in preparation for that I would talk a little bit about it. Because Uranus is a planet that brings shocks and surprises. It enters nowhere slowly. Instead, it comes in like a whirlwind, and it usually breaks things apart and shocks us by turning things upside down. Usually this is very freeing and liberating for us from old ways of behaving, to which we have become accustomed and perhaps do just because that's what we are expected to do. So on May 15th, when Uranus comes into the frame of reference of Taurus, there's beliefs that we have perhaps held down for a long time that can be shown to no longer have any worth or value. So it could be a change in our sense of values, our sense of worth, our levels of confidence, a change in the things that we own, the materials that we have. It could be that we suddenly have an incredible idea of how to, or that you have an idea of something you might want to invent that's of a material nature that changes the way people make their money or invest their money. But it can also be, Taurus is an earth sign, so that can be farming. The most domestic things in our lives. So I'm going to do on a future show Uranus's path through every one of the zodiac signs and how that will affect you, how it will change the different frameworks in your life, depending on what house in your chart it's transiting. So, but just for a brief overview on today's show, one thing that it will do is bring up different beliefs that can be brought into the framework of your knowing. So you may have never ever experienced a particular idea or belief system, and suddenly it is made aware to you. Suddenly you're awakened to that. Suddenly you know about it. And Uranus represents innovation, new discoveries, inventions, new technology, sudden awakenings, science, liberation, and freedom. And being that it has the tool of Taurus to work with, and Taurus is a fixed earth sign, and so it brings to the forefront things that are tangible, things that we can touch. So I would say Taurus represents the land, the land we live on, our money, our wealth, our material things, and the material things that give us a sense of security and stability, something we can fall back on, something that gives us a certain status and value in life. And that is what Taurus energy is most focused on. So Taurus can also be quite conservative. And while Uranus delivers the new, the unusual, and the extreme, above all, Taurus desires security, stability, and Uranus wants a revolution, wants something new. Let's break free from the norm. It thrives on inventing, extreme change. Taurus is slow, steady, a safe pair of hands, and Uranus is unpredictable, excitable, and lightning quick. So perhaps we can already gain a sense that Uranus and Taurus are not going to be a marriage made in heaven. They don't really work well together, so it could be some very striking changes in the areas of our materials, in the areas of our money, in the areas of our agriculture. Very unusual awakenings or ideas. So it's going to be interesting, very, very interesting to watch. So what can we expect? Well, one of the things that we do know in astrology is that we can look back at history. What happened the last time Uranus was in Taurus? And so, history can repeat itself, and it usually does, but never in quite the same way. And, we do have that free will to choose not to respond in that same way. However, the last time we saw Uranus in Taurus was in 1934 and in 1941, because it takes a while. It'll go into the sign, then it'll, by retrograde, go back into the sign before it, and then it moves forward. So that gives the little lapse of the years there. And before that, it was in Taurus between 1850 and 1859. So it's interesting. I do have the 1850 chart here that I want to show you. Let me just grab it. So 1851. Actually, 1851, you can see right down here, Uranus is in Taurus, and we actually had Pluto and Saturn all come into Taurus around the end of the year in 1851. It took a couple years to fully move into the sign of Taurus. But as you can see, there's a couple planets together, and these are what we call power planets. So the period 1850 to 1859 was the structuring of the Industrial Revolution. And beginning late in the year of 1850, as you saw in the chart, we had Pluto, Saturn, and Uranus begin to be right beside each other, conjunct in Taurus, which brought about technological and innovative changes. Basic materials such as iron and steel, new energy sources such as coal, the steam engine came at this time, electricity came at this time, the first modern oil well in the development of the internal combustion engine, the invention of new machines, new organization of work, new developments in transportation and in communication, the application of science to industry, mass production and social economic developments, and changes in urban areas, and much more. This was change on a massive scale, both cultural, demographic, technological, and industrial change. Remember, we had 3 power planets that move very slow, and when they are together, major change is the influence that, or the output. And so these were the things that we saw. This was, as I said before, change on a massive scale, cultural, demographic, technological, industrial. Before this period, daily life had not really changed massively, but this was like a technological explosion which pushed people into completely different lifestyles. Affected was where they lived, and how they worked. The 1930s, however, was a different period of change, a period when security, which is Taurus, was very much on the people's minds, because around the world, people's lives were impacted by the beginning of World War II. People's treatment of the land changed as they were asked to become more self-sufficient, and women were encouraged to help in the war effort by cultivating and growing food as the men went off to war. Women's lives were beginning to change dramatically. Women over the age of 21 had by now been given the right to vote and were now being encouraged to take on the men's roles in factories and on the farms. And now 80 some years later, Uranus again moves into Taurus. This is a really big cosmic transition, and it's occurring on May 15th, as I said earlier. And I have a chart that shows that. Let me just double check and make sure I have the right one here. Yeah, this is it. This is the chart for May 15th, 2018, and you can see Uranus in the constellation of Taurus. And I have to say, it's not, I'm sorry, it's right here, it's highlighted. I have to say that it's well aspected to Neptune in an applying aspect, but it is, and it's well aspected to Saturn. So it's going to be interesting, the changes that are going to be unfolding with Uranus moving into Taurus. And as I said, it takes about 84 years to travel through all the constellations. And some of the things that occurred while Uranus was last in Taurus back in the 30s, I'll just give you an idea of what occurred then. Nuclear fission produced the possibility of vast new energy sources. Now we are on the verge of nuclear fusion, giving us the potential of greater energy sources. Also back in the 30s, production of trans-Uranian elements, first practical radar tests, fiberglass, first HD color TV, the ballpoint pen, Superman and Batman, fluorescent lighting, the first commercial transatlantic passenger air service, and the first commercial flight that had pressurized cabins, the testing of the first turbojet aircraft, the first American-made helicopter. Nylon was introduced commercially. Color TV was just developing. FM radio receivers. Toward the end of Uranus's transit through Taurus in 1940, the fall of France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Romania to the Germans led to Britain and Russia becoming dependent on the USA. This was the beginning of the rise of the USA as a superpower. This was also the time of some of the first high-rise buildings, unusually different types of buildings reaching high up into the skies. In 1957, the elevators were invented by Otis when Uranus was in Taurus, and it made incredibly tall buildings more accessible, easier to get from the bottom to the top and the top to the bottom. So these are just some projections or ideas of historically what happened while Uranus was in Taurus. And for the future, providing some much deeper insight into Uranus's journey through Taurus over the next 7 to 9 years. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that and come back and watch future shows as I talk more about Uranus's ingress into Taurus on May 15th. And I'm going to say thank you to everyone who watches Turn to the Stars and appreciate your support. And until the next broadcast, I do hope that you take care and be well. And until wish you all well. And I say, as I learned and I've talked about in past shows, Kura Ut Valiaz means take care that you be well. And stay in touch. I look forward to talking to you and seeing you next time on Turn to the Stars.